Hello everyone, AmyR here with Prairie Paper and Ink, and welcome to my first video using some of the new products from Honeybee Stamps 4th birthday celebration / April 2019 release. So I am going to create some backgrounds because that's just what I'm obsessed with lately. Backgrounds and stencils and sprays and oxide inks. So I'm using the new, I started with the HEXAGON patterns stencils, and they are a set of 2. And I started with the larger openings stencil first, and I just have some smooth heavyweight white cardstock that I have taped to my glass surface with some washi tape. I just kind of folded it up and put it underneath the cardstock. And then I'm using 4 different colors of Distress Oxide ink. And I am using Wilted Violet, Picked Raspberry, Tumbled Glass, and Peacock Feathers, along with my mini ink blending tools, and just blending these over the stencil onto the card. And I'm somewhat blending the, colors into each other, but I'm not, going for a perfectly smooth blend because I am planning here to layer. And then I'm also going to be doing stamping and layering and all kinds of splatter, all that stuff. So these stencils aren't meant to layer, that's not how they were designed, but I was really curious to see what would happen if I did. And the thing with this is you could use any stencils for this, even ones that aren't meant to layer, because there's tons of layering stencils. Honeybee has a bunch of them, but you could also use 2 completely different patterns. Heck, you could use this one and then use one of the diamond patterns or whatever, just see what happens. So I put the smaller stencil on top, and then I blended the exact same colors in pretty much the same area, even though these colors blend together nicely. You definitely don't want to be doing greens and pinks and, turning things into muddy brown. But I did one with just the large stencil, so you can see that on the right, and then the one is layered, and it just creates this really neat sort of effect. So I did that with 2 backgrounds, and then I decided to do 2 more using the diamond patterns stencil because, as always, I can never, decide on just one. I need to use everything. So I did the exact same thing with the exact same colors, just a different stencil to create a different pattern. So same idea, tape down my cardstock, and all this cardstock is 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. My original plan was to do 2 cards, 2 cards with some stencil backgrounds. That turned into 4 backgrounds, which turned into 8 cards, which in the end turned into 10 cards. I just had a blast making these, and it just was a process. So with the diamond pattern stencil, I'm doing the exact same thing, just kind of blending on these Distress Oxide inks and, kind of letting them do their thing. And I'm going to do one background with just the large stencil, and then I'm going to do a second background layering the 2 stencils together just to get that really neat sort of effect. So I'm just going to tape the smaller pattern stencil over it and then blend the inks again. And again, just kind of keeping the similar inks, where I put the Tumbled Glass, I put more Tumbled Glass, the Mermaid Lagoon, etc., just to kind of make things a little bit easier. So after I get everything blended and I'm happy with it, the stencils with the large opening here that are just plain, I let these dry completely. They end up actually drying overnight. It doesn't take that long, but just my life got in the way. So I let them dry completely, and then I use my anti-static powder tool very liberally, and I'm using the coordinating HEXAGON patterns and diamond patterns stamp set, which coordinate with these stencils. So there's all different sort of patterns that you can stamp, and there's also coordinating dies, so you could do, all these fun, patterns and everything, fades and everything. The sky's the limit with stamps like this. So I started with just using the anti-static powder tool, stamping some of the patterns with clear embossing ink, and then white heat embossing them. So I started there, and then I went further with it and started stamping a bunch of the different patterns with those exact same oxide inks that I used to blend these backgrounds over the stencils. So I let everything, I melted everything with my heat tool, and then I got out those oxide inks, and then I'm just going to stamp them and fill in basically the rest of all of these little patterns here to create my own pattern paper is what I'm doing. So I'm just going along. It's all completely random. The nice thing about oxide inks is because they're part pigment, the color does sit on top. So I can do things like this, like even stamping the lighter colors on darker areas, etc. So I just go along and kind of fill in all of these little empty hexagon areas. And I'm going to do the exact same thing with the diamond pattern background using the Coordinating Diamond Patterns stamp set. And there's larger and smaller stamps in both of these sets, so you can use them with that, the larger and the smaller stencil, just depending on what you're doing. But I was stamping some of the smaller images just in the center, because why not? Why not? So after I did all of my stamping, I let that dry, like just set it aside to dry, and then I white heat embossed on the diamond one, just like the previous, and then again stamping things with the oxide inks just to create my background. And again, you could stop here. You could stop here. You have some great backgrounds. You can use them as is. You can cut them down like I'm going to do, etc. But I can't not add splatter. So once everything is stamped and dry, I am going to start adding a ton of splatter. And before I had the oxide sprays, I would smush either just regular distress inks or my oxide inks onto, an acrylic block and add water. But I found with my oxide inks, like the stamping inks, they took so long to dry and I would smear them all the time. That is one thing I'm absolutely loving about oxide sprays, is splattering them like this in the background. They dry so quickly, and that's why I'm splattering like everything lately, because I don't have to sit and wait for it to dry forever and then still end up smearing it because I'm too impatient. This I can pretty much splatter and it's good to go in a few minutes. So I just took all my oxide sprays. I'm using Picked Raspberry, Mermaid Lagoon, and Wilted Violet. And you shake the oxide sprays like a bell, like side to side, because you don't want it coming out the nozzle or around the band of it. And to do my splatter, I just like taking the nozzle right out of the bottle and just like flicking it at the background or whatever it is I'm splattering. So I splattered all 4 backgrounds very liberally with these oxide sprays, just to give it all that extra fun texture and whatnot. So I did all 3 colors on all 3 backgrounds, and then again let them dry for a few minutes. And then while those were drying, I am going to heat emboss the butterfly images from the Fluttering by stamp set. I have distressed watercolor paper here this time with the smooth side facing up, and I have all the butterflies, and I am doing the exact same thing, like anti-static powder tool, stamping everything with clear embossing ink. And then I'm going to stamp them twice because it's a little bit textured, not much, but I'm also stamping multiple images all at once. So stamp them a couple times, and then I'm going to white heat emboss all of these. And I do 3 sheets of them, since at this point I was like, I'm doing more than 4 cards. The thought process was coming together. So I was like, I'm going to do a bunch of them so I have, enough for all my cards. So I heat emboss them, and then rather than take all the time to color, I know that coloring and, watercolor or coloring the markers or any sort of like actual coloring can be intimidating for a lot of people. I get that. And sometimes when you're doing a ton, like you just don't have time for it. So this is another way to kind of fake it, is I just use the oxide sprays. So I picked up a tip from Tim Holtz in one of his recent videos. He was spraying his backgrounds just very lightly with water first. So that's what I did here. I just misted these backgrounds lightly with water. Just 2 or 3 spritzes. That's it. Then I sprayed the oxide sprays over it, and that really helps them to kind of move a bit and not get that really speckled pattern. If you want the speckled pattern, that's fine. But with these, I wanted more like almost solid coverage. So I would spray with water, spray with the oxide sprays, add a little splatter if I wanted to, or add even extra color with the nozzle, and then I'm literally moving the color around with my fingers. You could use a brush, totally. By this point, I already have ink all over. Like, I am stained. I don't mind it. It'll come off in a couple days or whatever, but I just added color, and I just kind of moved the color around with my fingers. So really, really simple, and I just did that with all 3 of these pieces with all of these butterflies, just getting the color, moving around. And then I'm going to set all 3 of these aside and let them completely dry. So very light mist of water, 2 to 3 spritzes, nothing crazy. You don't want like pools of water sitting on top of the paper. And then a few spritzes of spray. With this last one, I went heavy with the spray because I was curious what would happen, and I didn't like it. It was just kind of turning into just one solid color. So I kind of mopped up the excess with just my cloth here, and was already kind of liking how that was looking. And then just added some kind of like heavy splatter with the picked raspberry oxide spray. Just again, to kind of give it more of that little bit of pink. Added some little kind of extra spritzes just to bring in that pink. The picked raspberry, it goes on really bright, and then it really oxidizes, which is really fun. So I let them all completely dry. And then I can't not add shimmer, sparkle, whatever. So I pulled out my Tonic Glare Gloss Aqua Shimmer pen here, and I'm just painting it over all these butterflies. Now, because these are oxide sprays, they are reactive with water. So it is reactivating all of that, but I'm totally fine with that. Like these, again, everything is just sprayed and loose and messy and not perfect. I don't want that. So I'm just going over and coating everything with this glitter gloss, and it just kind of reactivates the ink, moves it around, and then gives it a ton of sparkle, which I'll show in a second here. So I just went and painted over all of these butterflies completely coating them with this glitter gloss so that they will have that really shimmery sparkle effect. So after I'm done painting those, I will be die cutting all of these with the coordinating honey cuts dies and just running them through my die cut machine. Everything will be die cut, and then I'll be good to go. So I'm going to turn the flashlight on my phone here and try and show how just insanely sparkly these are. Love. So got them all sparkly, die cut everything, and then I also stamped and heat embossed a bunch of sentiments from that Fluttering by set and die cut those. You can kind of see them in the corner there of the screen. And then with the backgrounds that I had stamped on, I used the HEXAGON solid stack wafer dies and one of the double stitch diamonds wafer dies to die cut out of both of those. And then that creates two different pieces that I can use. So I got 2 cards out of each of those backgrounds. And then these solid pieces here for backgrounds, I just trim them in half with my paper trimmer. And then a couple of them I actually trimmed. You can see there, I trimmed it one more time, just kind of got a narrower strip off just to give it a little extra something. So for these ones, to assemble, I kept it really simple. I just added like a strip of glitter paper to a card base. And then I added some black and white pattern paper because that's what I had in my stash. FYI, Honeybee has released pattern paper with this release, and it's amazing. I don't have any to show yet. It's not here yet, but I'll link to it with the release. I am super excited about that pattern paper. I cannot wait to get my hands on it. It just looks fabulous. So, alrighty. I adhered the backgrounds I'd stenciled. The butterflies were adhered with a combination of foam tape and craft tacky glue, and same with the sentiments. It was a combination of foam tape and craft tacky glue, depending on what card. I'm not going to show the assembly of every single card because it's just redundant, but I do everything in my normal, like, kind of mass production method. I do everything in the same step, so I did the backgrounds, then I did the butterflies, then I did, the die cutting, then I did the, assembly of the cards. Now I'm adding some embellishments. I just have some little like pearls in my stash here. So I sprinkled those on the background and I did all the cards at once. I, adhered all the pearls all in one step. And then that way I can set each thing aside and it makes this whole process, like even making 10 cards, went pretty smoothly. So I got 4 cards from each background, and then I was actually left over with a couple extra butterflies and some more sentiments. And for those, I'll show in a second how I made those into cards as well. But before I even got to that, I did the insides of these cards, and I just stamped more sentiments from the Fluttering by set onto the inside of the cards with some VersaFine Clair Nocturne ink. And then once I had the sentiment stamped, I went along and stamped some of the butterflies from the set with the exact same oxide inks I used to create the front of the cards. So I just inked up those stamps with the oxide inks and then stamped those onto the inside of the cards. And then set those aside to dry. And then I was good to go. So I did that with all of these cards. And then the 2 that were left, like kind of leftover butterflies, I just used the stencils and stenciled directly onto the card base, added some splatter, stuck on the butterflies, added sentiments. They were good to go. So like I said, I got 4 from the diamond patterns. So I have the 2 that have the stamping that I die cut with the double stitched diamonds. And then I have the two that I had the background that I cut down into strips. And I did the exact same thing with the hexagon patterns. Just had my background, and those I adhered those backgrounds with foam tape just to pop it up and give it some dimension. And then I have the ones with the strips. And then I have the last two that I made that I just stenciled directly onto the card base with those same oxide inks, added the same splatter, popped on the butterflies, popped on the sentiments, and then added the pearls to all of them just for that little extra shimmer. And that finished off all these cards. So as always, I will have a link below the video to my blog post. I'll have a supply list with links to the supplies used, like all that info will be in the description box below the video. And you guys can check that out if you are interested. Thank you all so much for watching and for subscribing and thumbs upping and commenting on my videos. And I will see you all very soon in the next one. Bye.